Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, A Pragmatic Approach to Assess Your Product Portfolio and Supply Chain. It's another webinar in our series, Straight from the Horse's Mouth, Insights from Experts in 30 minutes. So my name's Barbara and I'm your host for the next half an hour today. Martijn will kick off today and he'll give a brief overview of the overall methodology. We will then invite Rachel to the floor to share BASF's approach, and I'll close off with an example of how we have adopted the methodology to another sector. Martijn is the lead of our chemicals team, and he's also looking after the project on portfolio steering. So I'll hand over to you, Martijn.
Well, thank you very much, Barbara, for having me on this call today. So yes, I would like to give you an introduction into portfolio sustainability assessment and what this methodology is about. But first of all, why have companies embarked on this journey of having their complete portfolios assessed? Well, there has been a growing realization that over the last years, and nowadays this is more or less common sense, is that you can achieve higher revenues and a better growth rate with more sustainable products. These products cater better to the growing sustainability requirements that customers have on products. So it does make sense for companies to have a better oversight of what really the sustainability performance of their complete portfolio is, because these are questions that are keeping managers up at night. What is the impact of sustainability to our business? How does our complete portfolio contribute to the purpose of sustained value creation? So does our portfolio really provide benefits to society at large, and with that also to our customers and the customer demands that are out there? But also the risk part is an important aspect for doing a systematic portfolio assessment. Do I really have oversight of possible risks in my portfolio, products that are likely to be affected by regulations or by a negative market perception in the near future? And then of course, knowing all that and having these insights, how can I shape my portfolio towards more sustainable products, and how can I grow from that and expand my market position? And how can I inform my research and development and innovation processes internally based on the notion that I need to develop more sustainable products to be more business relevant in the end. So that's why companies have started developing sustainable portfolio sustainability assessment methodologies. And one of these companies which has been pioneering this field has been BASF, and we will hear later from Rachel what BASF has been doing and how they are using this method. BASF and thinkstep are in a strategic collaboration on the BASF method, which is called Sustainable Solution Steering, or often abbreviated SSS. So this is an assessment tool which BASF developed a couple of years ago, because they realized although they have quite a strong base in LCA, they cannot do LCAs on their whole products to get a sustainability notion of the products. And also LCA is limiting, because in that respect that it only looks at environmental aspects mostly. So the sustainable solution steering looks across the life cycle and covers also social and economic aspects next to ecological criteria. And it specifically looks at addressing the relevant sustainability signals that come from regulatory developments. For example, if you think of which is quite prominent at this point, at least in Europe, is packaging and plastic strategies from the European Commission. But also it looks at market signals. So what are important customers of BASF products saying? What are their requirements in relation to the products that BASF is developing? Now this tool is as you will see in a minute, very pragmatic and scalable, and can be applied to products and solutions, but you can also focus it on assessing the raw material base, as Barbara will later show you in the example that we've with the company called Bio. Also to mention that over the last 2-3 years, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development has been working on both a framework document on portfolio sustainability assessment, as well as a specific chemical industry methodology. And I had a chance to provide input in both these developments at the World Business Council. So let's have a look at the methodology. The Sustainable Solution Steering methodology works with a decision tree. And the decision tree was on purpose chosen by BASF because BASF has a very vast portfolio of over 60,000 products and solutions. So in order to see fast through this portfolio and make these assessments, a decision tree is helping because you can add early points where you identify sustainability risk. You can stop the further assessment on other criteria that you would otherwise have checked, and go in a concern intensity assessment. That's what the decision tree does. So at the qualifier check, the basic requirements relation to sustainability are checked, like hazard exposure along the life cycle, but also the profitability of the product, as well as some stakeholder requirements that important customers have, for example. And if one of these is not met, then a so-called concern intensity assessment is done. So let's have a little bit closer look in this check for basic sustainability requirements, which is the start of the assessment. And as mentioned, we look along the life cycle and covering the 3 pillars of sustainability. And in here, criteria like legal and regulatory standards are checked, or the code of conduct and company policies. But also requirements which come from the market, which come from the value chain, and developing regulatory requirements, as I mentioned before. Once these basic requirements are assessed, and if there is any risk identified in relation to these basic requirements, then the so-called concern intensity assessment is done. And basically what is asked is, what is the urgency to deal with the sustainability issue identified? And the second question that is asked is, what is the challenge to deal with the sustainability issue identified? And if the challenge is rather high, so it's a lot of effort to change the product, to reformulate the product, to have a new ingredient replacing one which has been identified as having a sustainability risk. And if the urgency is also very high because the customer is saying, okay, starting from August 2019, we are not going to source any products anymore which have certain key substances, for example, then a product will be called a challenge product. If you can manage to change the product in reasonable time and in reasonable effort, and you put an action plan in place to do exactly that, then a product will be called a transitional product. And on the other hand, if all the basic sustainability requirements are met, what is then done in the decision tree is the products are then assessed for their sustainability value contribution. So again, sustainability criteria are defined, which are relevant for, in this case, for BASF business. But Barbara will show you how we can also cater that to your businesses and your sectors. So then in the sustainability value contribution, it is checked if the products have a positive contribution to one of the relevant sustainability criteria in the markets. And these can be criteria, again, coming from economic, social, and ecological perspective. It can be criteria relating to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, for example, and examples you can see here on the slide. So what is done in the last step is then to check is, first of all, does the product have a positive contribution to one of these defined criteria? And then secondly, a comparison against the benchmark product in the market. So this is most probably the competitive product is done. And if both there is a substantial contribution to one of the defined sustainability criteria, and your product is better than the benchmark, then a product will be called an accelerator. And if it only has a sustainability contribution, but it's not better than the benchmark, then it would still be called a performer. And that is the way you classify, you categorize your whole portfolio and get insights on where are the products which may have a sustainability risk that I need to deal with, but also the products that have a sustainability benefit and that I can push further in the market and that I can use for my dialogue with my customers, for example. And with that introduction, I would like to hand over back to you, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Martijn, for this methodology overview. I know it was a really quick run-through, but my key takeaway is that this methodology does not only cover environmental issues, but also social and governance topics along the whole supply chain. So it really is a true sustainability assessment approach, and it can be tailored to specific sectors. I'll go into that a little more later on. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Rachel Fleishman. Rachel joins us today from Hong Kong. Rachel is the Regional Head of Advocacy and Sustainability Communications at BASF for Asia. Rachel will share with us BASF's approach to portfolio assessment. They call it Sustainable Solution Steering, or in short, SSS. Rachel, thank you very much, and over to you.
This is Rachel Fleishman from BASF, and I just want to introduce briefly how the Sustainable Solution Steering came about and what it's meant for ourselves and our customers. We'll talk a bit how and why BASF undertook what ended up being the world's largest product portfolio analysis for sustainability, and really why it's been impactful both for ourselves and our customers. So the why, what was the impetus for SSS? As all of you know, the mega trends which are shaping our world are only becoming more and more apparent in every industry, and BASF as the world's largest integrated chemical companies. So the impetus was really looking at the mega trends, and we as a company had set our corporate purpose as we create chemistry for a sustainable future. Now, we're not a company just to make claims, we're a very science-based company, and we want to ensure that we're fulfilling that corporate promise on the basis of data. So to set the boundaries, we needed to know just how sustainable our product portfolio was. And therefore, we set out to measure the impact of every product in every possible market use based on not just some internal criteria, but really these mega trends that are shaping our world. So this was about 6 or 7 years ago. We started by analyzing the needs of our key customers and industries, and then evaluating and categorizing, as Martijn just explained, all of the 60,000 plus products as they are used in the market, and then basically taking that whole life cycle, industry specific, geography specific application, and looking at how we could continue to grow and improve the portfolio. So the next slide will show what the results look like, and we call this snapshot a donut or a croissant, so pick your favorite breakfast bread, but basically shows what the distribution of the product portfolio is over the 4 categories that Martijn introduced. So the ones at the very top left, the accelerators, are those products which we have, based on our analysis, determined to contribute substantially to the sustainability of our customers. And these kinds of contributions are noted here to the right. So it could be a number of them involve cost savings, which usually are partnered along with energy savings, GHG savings, and cost savings usually bundled together. May have been able to use renewable resources, may have been able to use resources more efficiently, reduce waste, reduce water emissions, and contribute to the health and safety of not only consumers, but people along the value chain. Performers are those which are produced in the most efficient way possible within our integrated chemical production facilities, and meet all market standards. Then the transitioners have some identified gap, which we would then seek to address. And those that are challenged have a gap which requires an action plan. So we have committed to putting together an action plan for any product which we feel does not meet our criteria. They all meet legal criteria, but does not meet our criteria, what we feel is an evolving market needs for sustainable solutions. So the 8 factors to the right are what we're trying to optimize. And what's helpful about this profile is that the top and the bottom of the graph are obvious places for goal setting. So the BASF board set a target for the company to achieve 28% of our sales, our revenues from sustainable solutions or accelerators by 2020. We're almost there. We've come up substantially, but we're not quite there yet. And then at the bottom, those where we have concerns, either upgrading them or basically getting them out of the portfolio and replacing them. The next slide shows you a bunch of big figures. And the message here is this is a bit like going to the gym. You have to put the work in to get the results. And in our case, with such a large portfolio, we evaluated over 60,000 product applications in a couple of hundred workshops involving more than 2,000 colleagues. And every year we review a percentage of these so that every portion of the portfolio is reviewed every approximately 3 years. What do we get out of all this effort? Well, we've actually been able to identify science-based decision criteria, 800 actions that we'd like to take that will help us to upgrade our portfolio and better align it with our customers' needs. And we consciously direct more than 60% of the R&D money we invest each year to creating new accelerators. Next slide is about applications and opportunities. So why would you undertake such a comprehensive process? What's in it for you? And really the answer is a whole new level of transparency. So with this data, you can implement a much more comprehensive strategy, creating database decision opportunities, both to spot sustainability trends, to be where the market needs you to be when they need you to be there, and to steer your portfolio towards emerging opportunities. Equally important, also to get a bit of a red flag where there's emerging risks, so that you can both spot and manage or mitigate those risks. And this is where it's sometimes interesting to involve external experts or at least desktop research in the evaluation. Third, you could certainly promote your most sustainable products. So being able to position, and for us, allowing us to bundle our products and services along with our ability to do sustainability measurements has been quite important. And customers have started seeking us out because we have generated this expertise. And finally, being able to have very bespoke, again, data-based customer dialogues about what so the customers or customers' corporate goals are or market goals are. So it's creating a whole new level of transparency for our customers and helping them to design and steer their own portfolios of market offerings. The next slide is a bit of a value chain view, and really what it shows is that the needs of the consumers on the right-hand side are fully integrated up through the supply chain, through retail, through production, all the way through to sourcing via this mechanism. So if we are able to provide that data with what goes on within our factory gates, we can work upstream with our sourcing partners, downstream with our customers who are usually B2B applicators or manufacturers. It creates a whole new level of transparency that can then be delivered all the way down to the consumer. And we're finding that more and more the consumers want transparency on the chemicals in their products and peace of mind that the products that they're buying align with their values. corresponding to basically to the criteria, basic criteria that we used to the screening at the beginning, and that this quality is taken all the way through the value chain. So with that, I know we're quickly running out of time, so I'll just come to the end and thank everyone for joining.
Thank you very much, Rachel. It's always so good to hear a real-world example. That's really much appreciated. I do have one very quick question from the audience. You've briefly mentioned LCA, and does it mean that the whole portfolio approach replaces the need for LCAs, or do you continue doing some of those as well?
We absolutely are continuing to do life cycle cost analysis and other kind of eco-efficiency analysis. We find that particularly some of the bigger and more sophisticated brands have their own methodologies or specific aspects that they need data on, and so we tailor those sorts of analyses. We continue to tailor those sorts of analyses for our customers. What this does is it gives them a chance to look at what they're buying today and maybe even upgrading to a more sustainable element for making their formulation of, be it shampoo or car parts or paints and coatings or whatever it is we're selling them. So it doesn't replace, but it does complement.
Okay, thank you. So it means it really helps also your customers to make the right decisions on what ingredients they might use.
Exactly.
And that's exactly also how BioMar are using it. And I'll talk to you a little bit about another example. So thanks very much again to Rachel. And I guess a big thank you also to BASF for sharing their methodology, because what BioMar have done and what we've worked with BioMar on is to take the BASF methodology and adapt it to other sectors. There are a whole lot of other sectors who also have huge portfolios. Think retail, think packaging, think agriculture and food, or the apparel sector. And the idea is that there is a methodology that can be applied and adapted to other sectors too. So one of those examples I'll talk you very briefly through. And the other thing is, it's not only a BASF methodology, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development have actually come up with a whole framework on how those portfolio sustainability solutions should look like. And BASF were part of that working group, and we have contributed too. We'll send around a link to that. The World Business Council have set 5 criteria on how those assessments should look like. And I won't go through those in detail, but I'll rather talk you through how we can adapt the approach for other sectors. So the first step really is to define what are the sustainability needs and trends in the value chain of that particular sector. Step 2 is to evaluate and categorize the performance of those products or product groups in the sector or in the company that likes to apply the assessment. And step 3, almost the important one, is to actually do something with the results, to develop action plans. And I think that also came through quite clearly in Rachel's presentation. The example is BioMar. They are a Danish producer of feed for the aquaculture. What we have done is we've taken the steps that Martijn talked us through at the beginning. So first of all, what are the basic sustainability requirements? And for BioMar, we looked at what is already out there, what do the stakeholders think, and looked at, for example, what do suppliers think. Another example, what came up as really being really important is full traceability. It's potential conflicts with natural resources and biodiversity, availability of supply. So those were the requirements that came out in that first step of adapting the methodology. Then we've looked at the products that BioMar have and the raw materials they use, because that's how they wanted to apply it. And for those that completely fulfilled all those criteria, we did the benefit assessment check. So we looked at how do these really contribute to sustainability value. And in order to assess that, we looked at what are those criteria. Does it help cost savings? Does it help animal welfare, biodiversity, waste reduction? And now you'll probably think, oh my God, how can we come up with all those different criteria? And the good news is that you probably have done quite a lot of work that helps identify, firstly, those stakeholder requirements, but also the criteria that are relevant for your value chain. And we lean quite a lot on materiality assessments that companies have already done, pick out what is important to stakeholders. What we also often do is we'll look at what UN Sustainability Development Goals has the company already identified as being relevant. And then we can go into more detail here and see what are the targets that they have specifically identified. So a lot of the work has been done. There will be some work to do to actually fine-tune those requirements, but we don't have to start at zero. So we can rely on work that has already been done. Once we've got those and have done the first assessments, for those that fulfill the requirements, we do what Rachel has also shown us. We'll divide them up into accelerators and performers, or identify the gaps so that improvements can be done. Overall, for this project, raw materials accounting for 1.2 billion have been assessed. So they've really done quite a comprehensive study. They've identified 30 accelerator ingredients. So those are in the top performers, really. Have done action plans. And if you remember, Rachel said they've used about 2,000 or more than 2,000 experts. For BioMar, they had about 100 internal and external experts consulted. So that would be internal stakeholders, external stakeholders. And the reason we could reduce the number was that we could rely on some initial information, but we've also used a tool to collect some of the information. And I'll just give you a very quick glimpse of that. So instead of having over 2,000 experts in various workshops, we've collected the information in an online tool. And the advantage of that is you can also do it over time. The World Business Council suggests to repeat it the latest every 5 years. I think Rachel said they do it every 3 years. So to be able to compare timelines. You can also rely on data that is already available in other tools. So economic data, for example, can be pulled in automatically. You can then involve your stakeholders inside and outside of your organization to answer multiple choice or single choice questions, and have a 4I principle by reviewing the information before actually logging it in. So one person's answered the questions and another one would then be able to release the information. And the results are very similar to what we saw in that donut or in the graph from Rachel. Here we've got the accelerators in green, the performers in yellow, and the challenge project that we they will reduce or really have to seriously work on. They're shown in red. So you can see the results, but also, for example, for different regions or different product categories. So that's one way of really speeding up the process instead of doing it in a very intensive workshop process. To summarize, the overall value of doing a whole portfolio assessment is to really be able to make better decisions, to identify the sustainable solutions, because they, as Martijn showed at the beginning, do have a faster growth. It's about enhancing communication along the value chain to also enable your clients to make better choices. Identify risks, as in those challenged projects that you really need to do something about. And overall, well, improve stakeholder relationships, because you can also, of course, involve stakeholders in running the whole process. So that was a really quick run through, but I did want to leave a minute or so for your questions. Okay, so here is one question, and that was for Rachel. I'm interested in understanding how the 28% goal for the accelerator products was arrived at. Was it based on some pre-work, or was it a benchmark set by another company that you also wanted to achieve?
Okay, great question. We looked at other benchmarks from other companies, but we realized that the methodologies that our competitors were starting to use as they were also exploring this area were sufficiently different that they weren't directly applicable. So basically, we challenged each of our internal businesses, of which we have 13, to say what can you accomplish between that period of time, which I think was 2014 and 2020. And they came up with an estimate of what would be a stretched target for them, and we made a recommendation to the board, and the board made a decision. Now we're starting this process again, because we're getting better at it, but at the same time it's also getting harder because we've done maybe some of the most obvious, we've gone down some of the most obvious pathways, and now it's going to take new kinds of creativity and innovation. And so that process is starting again, and we've recently bought one of the most effective supercomputers in the world to help us to do some of the R&D data analysis to help us get better decisions. So it's iterative.
Okay, thank you very much. There was one question, and that was possibly to Martijn. How long, because Martijn was really more involved in the biomar projects than I was, how long does a pilot take?
If we do a customization of the SSS methodology for other sectors and other companies, the process is normally that we take about, it will take about 3 to 5 months to work out the new method and to do a pilot. So it will take us about 1 to 2 months to adapt the method based on the information that can be provided by the customer, such as the materiality assessment and further internal documents, and we complement that with desktop research on the regulatory environment and the market signals that are relevant for that customer in that industry. Once the method is developed, we set up the tool, and then we can do the pilot on a representative subset of the portfolio of the customer, and that will take another 2 to 3 months. So the whole process for developing the method and piloting it would be somewhere between 3 and 5 months, and after that is then the full implementation across the whole portfolio.
Thank you very much. With that, I think we have to wrap it up. Thank you very much again to Rachel and Martijn for sharing your insights with us. It was really good to have some real industry examples. Thanks again to everyone, and we're looking forward to seeing all of you next time.